We've got a trio of guests coming up to speak some more about veterans healthcare today. It used to be that if veterans wanted innovative therapies like psychedelic-assisted therapy, they would need to leave the country. But these folks are going to share with us a brand new program that is taking advantage of the Oregon model to provide direct services to veterans while also combining those efforts with rigorous research. So first, I'd like to welcome Jesse Gould, who's the president and founder of Heroic Hearts. Jesse. We've also got Skiles, who's a psychologist at the Portland VA. And last but not least, we have James R. Dixon, and they are a peer support specialist at the SNAP Lab, the Social Neuroscience and Psychotherapy Lab.
They'll bring another chair.
Hey guys, my name's Skiles. I wear multiple hats I just want to talk about really quickly. So I'm working at the SNAP Lab in the federal system, and when I work with Heroic Hearts, I'm actually a private citizen and psychologist and therapist for them. Having those nomenclatures is really important. I want to also burn through these slides really quickly so I can start to help you guys understand the difference between the Oregon peer support model, peer support facilitators, and the difference between veteran support, veteran peer support. So right now, about, two years ago, I meet Jesse Gould, who is running Heroic Hearts with a peer support model. And I've been working at the VA for a little while, and I say, Jesse, I think there's something to an apples-to-apples comparison. If we start using outcome data from PCL5s, PHQ-9, GAD-7s, we can start to actually compare what you guys are going through and what we've got at the VA. Because what we're finding at the VA with peer support is that we're helping folks re-engage with treatment when there's been a rupture. And they've been really good at creating reintegration and back into the community. It's something that Jesse actually has been extrapolating on when it comes to not only veterans, but veteran spouses, and really creating a community for folks to reintegrate back into. So the VA also describes veteran peer support as a veteran with a shared mental illness. So you have two creations here. Did that just happen? Okay. Yes, thank you. There we go, sorry. So what we're doing here is noting the different levels of veteran experiences as one shared experience, and then a shared mental health diagnoses. Something that we've been also tracking, James, myself, and some of the folks at the SNAP Lab, are other acts of peership in the psychedelic space. So psychedelic peership, the assumption that someone with firsthand experiential knowledge from previous personal psychedelic use can benefit the facilitation of someone and their psychedelic experience. So that's another level of a shared experience, and what we're finding is that can actually build trust in a therapeutic relationship and actually cause more enduring benefits for whatever the clinical outcomes are. One of the great examples that I like to use for this, I'm going to move through this quickly, is the MT1 trial for psychedelic peership, to walk away with a clearer image of how to present with and be with a client during their session. Thank you. So there's going to be some overlapping containers here. So now I'm going to bring you into the difference between veteran peer support and medicine circles, and kind of the cultural containers of what can define the difference between veteran peer support and regular peer support. What we're seeing culturally and why veteran peer support is actually done so well in traditional medicine circles is that there's some shared experiences around communication. So specifically what we heard of yesterday, why am I talking? who am I talking to? Is this information that I should be sharing right now with my chain of command? The talking stick that's used in a lot of medicine circles is really similar to the batons that service members will have before jumping into an operation. So talking about what they're going to be doing individually for the group with the baton, passing it along, and honoring that other person's intention for the group. There's also the aspect of transformational and rites of passage. So the military being one of the few rites of passage in the Western world that young people have today. I'll use the example of promotional ceremonies where folks can actually be acknowledged by a group that they are stepping into a new chapter in life. And that group is acknowledging that they have ascended into a new place to be respected and cared for. Similar to a medicine circle, moving through a healing experience where someone is moving into a new chapter in life. The group acknowledges this and walks with them together. So one of the aspects that I think Jesse and I have been figuring out to actually collect data for facilitation and what makes a good facilitator is often taken out of training programs. So spiritual knowledge is something that's been touted in a lot of training programs, but what does that mean, right? What kind of spiritual experiences are we actually looking at? So we've taken some of Stan Groff's work in the field as well as some anecdotal experiences and reports from veterans who've actually had a lot of spiritual experiences in combat. Just running through it briefly, the Kundalini awakening that folks can often pass off as an adrenaline dump, really reporting that they were also getting some messages as what to do in a combat experience and how to move around, how to navigate and survive. And return to center, let's say, is another one that's good to note. The near-death experience that folks can have that I think is one of my favorites. It's it's experience of humility, that a person can be a hero in one instance in an attack, and in the next attack be curled up crying, wanting to go home, and in the next attack be a hero again. This kind of baptism by fire. The aspect of the protectors and scapegoats and sitting with the different experience that marginalized communities know really well, the experience of a scapegoat. Military service in general, the fact that Black Americans offer more service members than any other demographic in the country, and that the military employs more transgender Americans than any other service in the country. These are communities of people that understand what it's like to be scapegoated when they step out of their roles in the service. And then also to sit with the other as it comes in, as it holds a different view to you, is something that's unique to the veteran experience because we're asked to put each other's lives in our hands, to trust the other as we would someone that is just as us. So one of the examples that I like to give is the social exposure that folks can have when sitting with the other. The fact that veterans have higher rates of interracial marriage and relationships than our civilian counterparts. It's not to say that racism does not exist in the military. That is to say that we are doing it better than you guys. So having anti-racist exposure is going to be kind of one of the benefits that I think a lot of folks can move through when you're looking at veteran peer support. And then sitting with the shadow warrior. So there is an aspect of the shadow warrior that's really difficult for many people to sit with when it comes to their mortality, when it comes to the greater military-industrial complex, and really stripping away from the machine and just seeing the person, and being able to access an entry point for somebody who's been in the system a little bit too long and maybe acting out experiences of perpetration. To know that as above and so below, and that somebody who is hurting someone externally is also more than likely hurting internally, and having that as an entry point as a challenger for them. And then as victimhood, it's something that I think veterans are uniquely set up for when it comes to actually inspiring each other. When I think about what we're doing here today and the inspiration needed when taking on the medical model and the academic institutions that we have, it would be easy to step into that victimhood and move into a less motivated and less resilient state of being. With that being said, stepping into resiliency and what makes a group resilient, what makes facilitators resilient, is something that Jesse and I have been talking about and moving through together one step at a time. And we're here to start that discussion. Thanks, guys.
So this photo that you see behind you actually occurred in Bend, Oregon. And it was the first legal veteran group that happened in the US. To my knowledge, is also the largest group that's happened to date, 8 veterans, all from the local Bend area, 2 female veterans, 6 male veterans. So I'm gonna gloss over a little bit of where we came from and how we got here, but focus more on how we got right now and the future, because that's important. That's the exciting things that's happening here in Oregon, and really gonna lay the groundwork for the rest of the US and what the culture of psychedelics look like in the US. And so just real quick, I'm Jesse. I was an Army Ranger, 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan. I got out of the military, hit pretty common mental health struggles when I got back, and there really was not an avenue to heal. There's only an avenue to maintain and be on medications potentially for the rest of my life. I was fortunate. I saw the warning signs. I heard about psychedelics, kind of had the same knee-jerk reaction. How the hell is that going to help? I already have enough issues. How's a psychedelic going to overcome these issues? But for whatever reason, just followed that intuition, ended up in Peru. Had a very challenging, very profound ayahuasca experience, which those of you who know ayahuasca, that's not surprising. And I found Heroic Hearts Project in 2017 just because I felt fortunate that I stumbled upon this thing that was already existing for thousands of years, but from a Western mentality. And Heroic Hearts Project was to educate other veterans that I knew were struggling, people I'd served with, many I'd already lost at that point. And really, if I was going to educate them and talk to them in a peer fashion where, you know, if you're in any sort of professional capacity, talking to somebody in a language that they understand, but then also facilitating their access to these therapies. So the past 6+ years, that's what we've been doing with over 850 vets, 100 spouses to Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and providing them a container of support to get to these psychedelic treatments and then continue on the healing back home. And that's great, and we're super proud of that, but there's millions of vets that have PTSD and are not getting served the healthcare they deserve, and there's no way feasibly we're sending 1 million vets to Peru in any year coming up. And so we have to figure this out in the US, and the veterans deserve it. It is a national embarrassment that veterans have to go overseas to get life-saving mental health care. I think we all know that.
Sure.
So real quick, the frame of this peer support. So, I mean, we all know, I think most of us are here because of the amazing healing powers of psychedelics, and there's a lot to learn. But this is also transforming how we treat mental health. I think we are all aware of like the cliche one-on-one, lay on a couch, tell the therapist what your problems are, and that can work in many situations. But if you just go back a few hundred years, mental health was always a community thing. If you had an issue, it was everybody's issue, right? Because we had smaller groups. And in the age of the internet and the age of COVID, those community systems have really dissolved. And you see this in the veteran community especially, where previous generations had the VFW, American Legion. My generation of veterans don't go there just because they're outdated. They don't cater to us, and they're not about health. They're about getting drunk and sharing war stories. And so there's just an absence of community centers in general for veterans, and especially beyond that. But I think veterans feel it particularly just given the camaraderie that we come from, and then the gross absence of that afterwards. And so the peer support in terms of changing mental health is really what we all yearn for. Physical connection, one-on-one connection in person, not on Facebook, not on Messenger, not even on iPhone. And we just don't have the infrastructure anymore for that. And I do think psychedelics are inspiring a new pathway towards that, and that's what we see in Bend. That's why we specifically wanted local veterans, so then afterwards, not only at the point of psychedelic where they get over their hurdles, they can continue to show up for each other. We need accountability when we least want it. And the only way is if we get into the habit of showing up for other people and having them show up for us. And that requires infrastructure, that requires pattern, that requires a community. And from there, there's so much more that's possible. It's one of these entourage effects that the community becomes its own organism that creates so much more. And so real quick, November 18th, we put together with Bendable a veteran group. It was the first in the US of veteran retreats. Psilocybin, we did multiple ceremonies, but we borrowed from what we've learned working with amazing indigenous tribes and amazing ancient knowledge of the fact of ceremony, the fact of these retreats, the fact of isolation. And so these veterans were separated from their families, from their day-to-day lives for about 5 days. We found a beautiful ranch, and then we took them to the Oregon-approved model of psilocybin, and we did 2 ceremonies so that they could really get deep into it. And then back at the ranch, away from cell phones, away from everything else, they could really be themselves. They could really be vulnerable. They could really get to the depths of what was what had been burdening them. And it's only one step in hopefully a continuous mental health sort of situation, but that's also what we're changing. This is not prescription. This is not medication. This is showing up for yourself. This is each time getting to know yourself, connecting to your intuition, and unraveling years, if not decades, of trauma. And so it was an amazing experience to be part of, and I'm happy to share more about it when we have more time and in the Q&A. We'll have the testimonies from it, but across the board, every single veteran got exactly what they needed at that spot. There was not one person that didn't walk away with something profound. And it's one of those things that really opens up a sustainable, accessible model. And this is not just for veterans. Fortunately, we have the political capital to get the attention, sometimes the donations, to get the politicians on our side. But what we can learn can then be used by many other subgroups, many other diversity groups that vastly are underserved by mental health, and really change this on a community level, still within the medical system, but actually democratizing mental health in a way that's never been, and being supported by the people that are best equipped to actually support it.
My name is James R. Dixon. I use he and they pronouns. I wear a couple hats as well, which I'm sure I've told a lot of people because I've met a lot of really amazing people this weekend. I do not speak for the VA, but I am a peer support facilitator with the SNAP Lab. I'm also a Black Youth Suicide Prevention Coordinator for Multnomah County, which is the county you're in if you're not from here. This is Multnomah County. That's my full-time gig. I'm a United States Air Force veteran. I went in the military fresh out of high school. I really appreciated hearing Darren and Ruben come up. I'm from North Carolina as well. I don't know if y'all, are they still in the room? All right. I'm from North Carolina as well, and growing up in North Carolina and being black, knowing that I'm queer, knowing that I was queer, it was difficult. You know, we don't talk about mental health in black, and my black family didn't, and most black communities don't. So joining the military was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna join the military. I don't wanna be here anymore. I'm gonna go out, explore the world. I'm gonna go fight for my country. I didn't realize that, you know, in serving that there was a lot that I needed to unpack for myself before I went and put on a uniform, right? I went into the military. I worked on the U-2 spy plane as an electronic warfare system specialist. So I have an electronics background. I did not see any combat. I'm not a combat veteran. I do have PTSD. And my PTSD, primarily from my military experience, is from a sexual trauma. And I know we talk about that a lot today. We talk a lot about sexual trauma and how that, and let me back up. I remember earlier we were talking about sexual trauma, and I hear it being more women focused, especially at the VA. I'm in a unique category where, you know, being male and and having an assault that was from another male who happened to be white and a military police officer. It's a very unique situation, right? So when we think about peer support and what we're offering, we're talking about lived experience, right? We're talking about lived expertise. How can we connect with other veterans that have experienced what I've gone through? Even if I haven't gone through that, how can we create space with that person, right? In my day job, I'm gonna go off script a little bit, but in suicide prevention, you know, someone said something about racism earlier, and one thing I love about who I work for, Multnomah County Health Department, we've established that racism is a public health crisis. It's on our website. Yeah. Public health. And here in the state of Oregon, we have black children in every county. Every county. And, you know, this is a very liberal county. There's, you know, I've seen more black faces today in this room, believe it or not, from psychedelic work than I see in most spaces I'm in. But there's still not enough, right? But when you think about the fact that there's black children in every county, imagine what these black children are going through in rural parts of the country. And then, on top of that, you're asked to serve in the military, right? So when we talk about being in the military, we talk about combat. All of that combat and all this other stuff happens after all this other stuff. We have a whole life outside of that. You come into the military, you come out, and then you come home, and then you're a second-class citizen. I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I knew that I was gay when I went into the military, and I was like, well, I'm gonna do this anyway. It was extremely microaggressive. I was in a predominantly male shop with, I think we had a woman that was in our shop. They were all pretty straight. They were telling, you know, homophobic jokes on a daily basis. This is part of the military culture. And it was very, very, very microaggressive on top of the fact of what I went through. I talk about this today because every veteran experience is drastically different, right? And when we're looking at peer support and how we can create space for folks, a lot of times it takes a moment to just say, hey, I've been through something as well. I'm here for you. How can I create space for you? How can I bring you closer to healing? When we add racism and we add the access to care and all that other stuff we've been talking about today, I'm gonna toot the horn once again. There aren't enough people that look like me in this work. There just aren't. And there aren't enough people that have access to these resources. How can we afford this stuff? How do you talk about mental health to a person that comes from a family that doesn't talk about mental health? How do you bring them closer? How do you create space for them? I feel like I'm rambling. I came into this work because I wanted to help people. I'm a public servant. I work in a government system. So when you think about government systems and the harm that have happened in government systems, that's something we have to think about. What systems have harmed people, and how do we interact with that system in a way that we can create more safety for folks? What does good trouble look like? Right? I love that there was a reaction to that because I've been waiting to say that. I've been waiting to say that all. I was like, Because I hear about pharmacology, I hear about neuroplasty. I don't know this stuff, right? That's not what I bring into this work, right? What does good trouble look like? How do you have these conversations about all this amazing, brilliant stuff you guys do in a way that calls people in and makes them want to be a part of this work and makes them want to go through their mental health journey? That's what I'm challenging people with. Anyway, let's go to the Q&A.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your experiences and expertise. One question that the audience is particularly interested in hearing your perspective on, and we just have a couple of minutes to finish this up, but they're very curious how we deal with moral injuries and perpetrator trauma, right? So your communities are particularly affected by, potentially shameful, events that they have committed. So how is your model, and how are you personally dealing with those types of situations?
So right now, the model that I just set up, I don't know if I could play it back for you guys, actually. Nope. So the model of change that I was looking at was the challenger and the creator, as well as the coach. And we operate often through, that's our model is the inner healer intelligence. And to be able to allow someone to go inward and find what best needs to come out for their own healing. And a lot of the time, if they're sitting with moral injury, what's been most beneficial for folks is to sit with the challenger in a compassionate way that, again, notes the dynamic is as above, so below. That the indigenous wisdom that hurting the other ultimately hurts myself. And to be able to have some self-forgiveness is what's ultimately important. I think a lot of the times what's the real challenge is for the facilitator to allow space for that to happen. Because there's so many folks, I think, that have a lot of judgments around perpetration, rightfully so, and if you've had your own experiences with that, it's something that every facilitator needs to sit with to be able to hold space appropriately for compassionate forgiveness.
Any final remarks before we wrap?
For me, with the moral injury, especially, I'm a firm believer in archetypes, and I do think that there is this warrior archetype, and the reason there is moral injury is because people show up in service. They want to defend others that are not able to necessarily show up in that capacity, put themselves at risk for others. That is a baseline thing of the warrior, of the veteran, that goes back through most societies and cultures. The problem comes when it gets disturbed by those that are choosing where to use this archetype, these people, in terms of politicians and this and that. And so these individuals, because there is moral injury, they're going into it with this intention of this sort of noble dynamic. And, we can debate all of that and stuff, but at the very core, they're going in with good intentions. They're going in terms of what's calling to them. And when you go into these dynamics like in the Iraq War, where there was no real justification for being there, then it calls into question, or then, with the no exit strategy and all this other kind of stuff, it really causes this dynamic where this person thought they're being honorable, but then almost being used in a way that wasn't honorable, that didn't align with their moral values. And so from our perspective too, it's aligning them to that, hey, you were working within your archetype, within your honor system, and were deserved as well. And also just gathering veteran voices, building these communities so that that voice is stronger in the future, to where it's much harder for governments and politicians to utilize them in that sort of capacity.
Yeah. James, I'm curious to hear from you if you have anything to contribute.
What was the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, your experience dealing with moral injury, the folks you're working with who have committed things that they feel guilty or ashamed of.
You know, I actually, to be frank, I've had limited experience with that. I've had in my own personal journey. When I think about going through my moral injury and going through my CBT training and going, like, I was not prepared for how I would react to it. And I remember when it happened, I wanted to turn the computer off and scream and leave the room. And I really wished I had more guidance at the time. You know what I mean? I felt very isolated. I felt like I'd been dug from the inside out. And when I think about that experience for myself and wanting to support other veterans in their moral injury, I'm in many cases, I'm just like, hey, how can I sit with you? What can I offer you in this work? More specifically, how can I be present with you? What can we offer? I think getting closer to folks and telling them, hey, that we're here to be a part of your journey. You're not on your journey alone. You can apologize to that. When I apologized to the youth, my young self, I was like, oh, wow, I get to do that. Like, yeah. And like, and when I think about my service in particular, I didn't think about combat or anything like that. I just wanted a job. I wanted to get, I'm from a poor Black community. I wanted to get out, and I wanted to get out of North Carolina. Love North Carolina, but in the 80s, growing up in the 80s in North Carolina was not fun being Black and queer, right? So moral injury, it's on so many levels, so many levels. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us, both lived and, in your own bodies, as well as, what you've done with your communities. We're really looking forward to more of these retreats, with all these additional service centers that are coming online. One thing we heard yesterday was the need for service centers that have, some more outdoor space. And briefly in the 1 minute that we have left, I'm curious how that particular retreat or future retreats might benefit from not having to leave the service center to maintain, the container of your 5-day retreat. Do you think that you lost anything from having to do the schlepping?
Actually, it was a minor inconvenience. But we were fortunate somebody allowed us to stay at the ranch at cost, and it was in this beautiful, gorgeous spot. And so it actually did feel like an international retreat we did. And so the busing back and forth, not the most ideal, but it also wasn't super disruptive. Ideally, you want to create the container and you want to keep people within that and have this almost like psychedelic island that they can keep in their mind, not break that bubble. But we, again, we have to figure out how this is going to work in the US, and it's not always going to be as easy as being in a beautiful beach in Costa Rica, and so there's going to be many options, but it does pave the way for more access to more people in various different ways, and that's really what we're for.
I think you've set a really great example for us, so thank you so much. We should thank our guests for us.